What's up, guys? Today we'll be going over the new Warlock exotic helmet in Beyond Light, Dawn Chorus, and we will be breaking down exactly what this exotic does in this video, going over how good it is in PvE, and then finally be making a really good build. And as the title reads, it might be one of the best builds I've ever made. I know I've made a lot of really good builds, and I think this is up there with some of the best ever. Anyways, before we begin with the video, I want to say thank you for anyone and everyone that used my G Fuel code last week. You guys killed it and really popped off on my first week with G Fuel, and I can't thank you guys enough for all the support. And that link will always be there in the comments and description. Anyways, let's go ahead and begin with the video. So first, how to get this exotic. It's gonna be from the Legend and Master of Lost sectors, which rotate between Europa and the Cosmodrome. Whenever you see one that says if solo exotic head armor, you can get this helmet from that one. Obviously, I would wait for it to be the 1250 because of the fact that we are all pretty much under light. I've also made a video showing off my builds I use in these Lost sectors, so I'm not going to explain exactly how to solo them. You can go watch that video if you need more information. So looking at the exotic helmet, with the exotic perk Rites of Ember, your daybreak projectiles cause targets to burn on contact and deal more damage to them. All of your burn effects last longer, and you gain a small amount of melee energy each time one of your burns damage a target. So there's a lot going on with that perk, and we pretty much have to be using Dawnblade, which is either top tree or bottom tree. And for the way that this exotic works with all the different burns, bottom tree is the one that makes way more sense because your melee will burn and also explode enemies. Then the super itself is the better ad clear super and will last the longest. And this helmet seems like it buffs the super in some way. So obviously taking advantage of the best Dawnblade super makes the most sense. So looking at what this does in PvE, the first thing is it makes your burns last longer. So in Carl, the burn damage takes from 197 for quite a while, and that's obviously not a lot of damage at all. One thing is we get our entire melee back by the time it's done burning, which means as long as our strength tier is high enough, we can infinitely chain our burn melees, which is cool. But once again, it's taking for 197, which pretty much isn't even like make a difference in any situation. So what the melee is really going to be used for is for ad clear. Whenever you hit one enemy and kill them, they will explode and pass that burn to more and more enemies. But once again, unless you're playing super high content, those enemies die pretty quickly, which means you're no longer burning them, which means you no longer get your melee energy back. One thing I did notice pretty much right away is that your solar grenades count for this perk and will help you get your melee energy back. So then I tested with a bunch of other stuff in the game to see if it worked also, and things like martyrs or pretty much anything solar I tested did not work, just your solar grenades. So I guess that is pretty interesting to know that you can use your grenade to get your melee back with this exotic also. So overall, the melee part of this exotic is cool. It allows you to chain your melee pretty much forever, but it's not like your melee is insanely good, so I'm not quite sure how useful that is. But look at the other part of exotic, where your daybreak projectiles cause targets to burn on contact and deal more damage to them. When you start looking at that, now this is where the exotic really shines. So look at the damage on Carl with a base Dawnblade. The first impact number hits for a little over 12,000. Then if we go ahead and throw more at him once he's burning, as you see, the numbers will start turning yellow as if they're doing crits. And as you see now, the big number hits for over 17.4 thousand. And the thing is, if we keep going, that number actually goes up even more to 25,000. And one thing I found out is that you can melee the boss first to get the burn going. That way, the very first Dawnblade you hit him is already under the buff. As you see, as we do this, the numbers keep going up and up and up, all the way up to 36.6 thousand. And obviously, Carl died well before my Dawnblade was out. So I then went over to a strike boss to see what the numbers are. As you see, the base damage of Dawnblade is pretty similar to what it was on Carl, and as we throw all 8 of our Dawnblades at the boss, the numbers will scale up and up and up, and I believe the highest number we saw on Carl is also the highest number we see on this boss ever, which is going to be that 36.6 thousand number. And look at how the buff scaled. The first 4 were 45% more damage, then the 5th, 6th, and 7th were 110% more, then the final one, which is the last one, was a 205% buff. So now I tried it with a teammate, that way we would both be throwing them at the same time. And as you see, we get to the highest buff faster, then have that buff the rest of the way. So I think the highest buff you can get is that 205%, but the more people throwing Dawnblades at an enemy, you'll reach that buff even quicker. The 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th were all at that 205% increase. So now if we look at like the rate of fire of Dawnblade, you can throw 8 of them on bottom tree, and that will take roughly 6.056 seconds, which means in one super we do 542,000 total damage, which means 90,000 damage per second. So that is pretty damn good from a super. It's up there with some like the top tier ones. And the thing about this is it also stacks with debuffs, which means we can get another 30% damage on top of that. So the way to do this would be you debuff and melee the boss at the exact same time, which would result in over 700,000 total damage in just the one super usage, which is 116,000 damage per second. So this super is insanely good for single target damage now. It's actually crazy. And since the numbers turn yellow, I was thinking, does this just debuff the enemy for everyone? And unfortunately, it doesn't seem like that is the case. I double checked it and even triple checked it, and it did not seem to work. It's only Dawnblade that gets the buff to the boss. It'd been super cool if it just debuffed the enemy for everyone for their weapons, but at the same time, what it does is insanely good as is. One thing I did find out while testing is that even if I don't have the helmet on myself, if my teammate has it on and throws Dawnblades at the boss, you will still receive the increase to the damage just as if you were doing it yourself. But at the same time, I don't think your own Dawnblades would contribute to getting that buff to the 205% cap as fast as possible. So I think you using the helmet is still beneficial. So overall, this helmet takes one of the best ad clearing supers in the entire game, Bottom Tree Dawnblade, and pretty much the only thing that was weak about that super was the fact that once you got to higher health enemies and bosses, it was pretty much useless. But now you can clear out ads like crazy and get your super back because of the perks on that tree. Then when you get up to a boss or a group of large majors, it still shreds them. I mean, it goes right through them. Like, this super is insane now. And now for the good part of the video, which will be the build. We're going to be starting off with the new artifact perk, Berserker. When your super ends, you gain a temporary bonus to weapon damage. The duration and strength of this bonus increases based on the number of combatants you defeated with your super. So if you go ahead and test that in the Lost Sector, I hit 782 on this Harpy. Then if I go ahead and pop my super and get as many kills as possible, which in this Lost Sector is quite a bit, probably like 25-ish, I will get a buff called Damage Boost times 4 for 50 seconds. And now on the Harpy, I hit 10,055, which is going to be a 35% increase for 50 plus seconds. So that's Weapons of Light for all of your weapons for 50 seconds. That is actually crazy. Then I tested to see if this would stack with other buffs, and it did not, which doesn't surprise me at all. Obviously, most buffs don't stack in the game, and given that this is a 35% increase, which is tied with the highest in the game, Weapons of Light, obviously I did not expect it to stack. But pretty much what this mod does is give any character Weapons of Light for pretty much almost a minute at a time. And given the way the super works and how good it is with this helmet, we can pretty much get that times 4 boost every single time. So now looking more into the build, there's gonna be pretty much two separate builds going on at the same time. The first one will be all about solar damage because of the fact that Bottom Tree has all the burns and the enemies exploding. We're gonna pair that with Martyr's Retribution, which is another solar type weapon. And we're going to use Wrath of Rasputin. That way any of our solar damage can create Warmind cells. Then all we have to do is pair that with Global Reach to enhance the radius and explosion of those cells itself. So now pretty much everything we have can create Warmind cells. So our grenade can, our melee can, our Martyr's Retribution can, then also our super can create Warmind cells. It's not as consistent as the other three veins, but it can happen. Then the other build going on at the exact same time is the one all about our super. So we're going to be using Bad Juju, which I haven't used recently, but it has the exotic perk String of Curses, kills refill the magazine, increase damage for a short duration, and grant super energy based on the strength of String of Curses, fires full auto. Then the catalyst makes the perk last longer. Obviously we're going to be pairing that with Berserker that we just showed off. Then we're going to have a Chargeable Light build starting with Swift Charge, which will allow us to become Chargeable Light every single time we get 3 kills with Bad Juju. Then we'll be using Supercharge, which will allow us to become times 4 Chargeable Light. Then finally, with those stacks of Chargeable Light, we'll be using Energy Converter, which means every single time we throw a grenade, it will consume all stacks of Chargeable Light and give us super energy up to the first 50% of our super. So pretty much how this works is you will be getting kills with Bad Juju to get your super and become Chargeable Light times 4. Then you pop your super once you get it and use it for ad clear, use it for boss damage, use it for whatever. I found while testing for the Berserker mod, the higher the tier of enemy that you kill, the more weight it will have in getting the buff to times 4. So let's say if you kill 20 red bars, you'll get times 4. If you kill like 10 majors, you will also get times 4. So the majors and ultras count for a higher percent. Then by the time your super is done, you'll have Berserker times 3 or times 4, depending on how many enemies you killed, which will give you up to that 35% buff for your weapons. Also, you're already times 4 Chargeable Light, so you throw a grenade, which will give you the first 25% of your super, then use Bad Juju the rest of the way, which, by the way, String of Curses is a huge buff. It's pretty much like old Rampage. Then on top of that, you have that 35% buff of Berserker, so your Bad Juju is doing an insane amount of damage overall, and you just keep using it to get kills. Then you have your super recharge before Berserker even falls off, and you're already times 4 Chargeable Light. That way, when the super ends, you throw your grenade, rinse and repeat. So overall, this build is actually insane. The Dawnblade Super with this exotic is insanely good for ag clear, insanely good for major clear, insanely good for single target damage. I mean, it's just good for everything. This build is so efficient that I get my super back before I even have my nade back. So using something like Demolitionist in your secondary slot will help you get your grenade back. That way you can then throw your grenade and get that 25% of your super. And another thing that is really cool about this build is it's useful for hard content. You can use Thermal Overload to disrupt overload champions. Then on your gauntlets, you can also use Anti-Barrier Pulse Rifle with Bad Juju, so you can stop 2 of the 3 champions. So this build is good for ordeals, good for the solo lost sectors. It's just good for everything, to be honest. Anyways, the rest of the video will just be one strike where I pretty much just chain it over and over again throughout the entire strike. And overall, this build is just so versatile and has so much synergy. It's so easy to chain it back and forth. You use your super, which is insanely good with this helmet. Then after your super's done, you have the 35% damage boost, and during the time that you have that bonus, you can then get your super back. That way, once that 35% is gone, you already have your super and you do it again, and the cycle just keeps going and going and going. Then on top of that, we also have a really good Warmind Cell build with all the solar stuff and Wrath of Rasputin. And not to mention that Bad Juju plus the 35% of Berserker plus String of Curses times 5 is a really strong primary. I mean, I was pretty much cross-map 2-bursting knights. I mean, it is really good. Then for boss fights, you still have your sword, and we don't have Lucent Blade on this build because, well, we already have a 35% buff with Berserker, so no need for Lucent Blade. Then the other option for boss damage is using your super. This exotic makes Dawnblade one of the top tier boss dealing supers in the entire game. Obviously, it's not that I match the burst DPS of something like Nighthawk or Nova Bomb, but for total damage output, this is probably the best in the entire game now. Anyways, I think that's gonna be it for the video. Thanks for watching. Catch you guys next time.